All right, fire. I mean, who doesn't love a good bonfire?
Yeah.
Staring into the flames, that warmth, it's almost primal, right?
Absolutely.
It makes sense, though. Fire has been with us, with humans. I mean, like, as long as we've been around.
Yeah, for sure.
I think usually we picture our early ancestors, and they're using fire for, the basics, like staying warm or cooking.
Right.
Maybe keeping away predators, all that basic survival stuff. But what if it was more than just a tool? What if fire was like a key part of how early human culture developed?
Interesting.
And that's what we're looking at today.
Yeah.
With this new study from the Fuente del Salín cave in Spain, it's all about the Gravettian hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
They lived during the Ice Age.
Right. It's a fascinating period, Imagine Europe covered in ice sheets.
Oh, wow.
Just brutal conditions. But the Gravettians, they thrived in those conditions, and they were so skilled.
Yeah, they were known for their cave art, weren't they?
Yeah. Incredible, right. And their tools, really advanced. But what's interesting is they were spread out all over Europe.
Wait, weren't they pretty mobile?
Yeah, highly mobile.
Yeah.
And yet they seem to maintain all these distinct traditions.
Huh. So, given the whole Ice Age backdrop, you'd think that fire was mostly about, staying alive.
Sure.
Just getting through those freezing temperatures.
That's the force, yeah.
But then we have this Fuente del Salín cave in Spain.
Right.
That's where things get interesting.
It really challenges that simple idea of just surviving, right?
Yeah.
See, the Cantabrian region of Spain where this cave is, it wasn't as cold as other places where the Gravettians lived.
Oh, interesting.
And yet they were using fire a lot in this cave, like a surprising amount.
Okay, so let's talk about what they actually found in the cave. What was in there?
Well, they used some amazing techniques, micromorphology, for instance.
Yeah, lads.
Basically looking at teeny tiny details of the cave sediment under a microscope. They also used micro-XRF fluorescence to figure out, what the chemicals were in there.
Oh, cool.
And what did they find? All these stack hearths, layer upon layer of ash, burnt bone, charred plants.
So it wasn't just sort of random, like someone had a small fire.
No, not at all. This was systematic, like a really deliberate way of keeping the fire going and reusing it over and over.
Wow. Okay, so they weren't just throwing a couple of logs on the fire to stay warm.
No.
It sounds like they were creating a whole environment, like building something around the fire.
Yes, exactly.
This was intentional. So, what does that tell us? How did the Gravettians think about fire?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
It makes you realize fire might have been more important to their culture than we originally thought.
Right.
It wasn't just about not freezing. It was part of how they lived.
Yeah. Okay, which leads us to another really cool find, the burnt grass beddings.
Yes.
What's the story there?
That's where things get really interesting. Similar burnt plant layers have been found from around the same time period.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like Sabudu Cave in South Africa, for example. Researchers think this might be one of the earliest examples of sanitation practices.
Wait a minute, so they were burning their bedding to clean up.
It's a possibility. Think about it, They didn't have our modern hygiene.
Yeah.
Burning old bedding.
Right.
Could have been a way to get rid of pests.
Like fleas or...
Yeah, fleas, ticks, all of those. And we see this today, too, in some modern hunter-gatherer groups.
So I'm trying to picture this in my mind. It seems strange,
Of course.
But if you think about how they were living back then,
Right.
it makes a lot more sense.
It does.
What seems bizarre now could have been logical back then, even sophisticated.
Exactly. And it just shows how important fire was.
Yeah.
It wasn't just warmth. It was woven into, their hygiene, part of daily life.
Okay, the study also mentions something about manganese oxides. High concentrations of them in the hearths. What's that all about?
That's a good point. It's
Yeah.
important. Some researchers think that Neanderthals, who were around before the Gravettians, they might have used manganese dioxide to make starting fires easier.
Oh, interesting.
It lowers the temperature you need to get the wood burning.
Uh-huh.
So finding those oxides in the Gravettian hearths, it makes you wonder if they learned that from Neanderthals.
Wow, that's amazing to think about. So the way we make fire today could go all the way back to the Neanderthals.
It could, yeah.
That shows how everything is connected,
Absolutely.
And also, this shows that the Gravettians weren't just using fire. They were, manipulating it, understanding it.
Right. Yeah.
It seems like they had a pretty good understanding of how to make fire.
Yeah, it adds a whole other layer to their, fire technology.
Right.
They weren't just hitting two rocks together.
Right.
They were using their knowledge to get it done more efficiently.
Yeah, so we have the Gravettians carefully tending their fires, using them for warmth and cooking.
Right.
Maybe even sanitation. And possibly drawing on Neanderthal knowledge?
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is, yeah. But what about the social aspect of fire?
Hmm.
How did fire influence their interactions and their sense of community?
Now we're getting to something. Just think about it. Fire brings people together.
It does, yeah.
In a world with no electricity,
Yeah.
the hearth would have been the center of everything.
Oh, for sure.
Warmth, light, social interaction.
It's easy to picture them sitting around the fire, telling stories, teaching skills, just bonding.
Absolutely.
Almost like the original social media.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they were reusing the hearths in these caves. This wasn't just a one-time campsite.
Yeah.
It came back over and over, probably seasonally.
Makes sense.
It created a sense of place, of continuity.
Yeah, especially with their nomadic lifestyle.
Right.
These sites would have been stable, a way to reconnect even when they were moving around.
Precisely.
And this connects to what we know about the Gravettians, They
Yeah.
were spread out, highly mobile, but they kept these strong regional traditions. So this consistent and deliberate use of fire everywhere they went suggests that they all had this shared cultural knowledge.
Yeah,
It helped unite them.
I think so.
So fire, it's more than a practical thing. It symbolizes their connection, their shared identity, like a cultural glue.
Yeah, glue that holds them together, even across great distances.
That's amazing.
It really is just a powerful example of how technology, even something like fire, can completely change social structures and cultural identity.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've been talking about how important fire was to the Gravettians, like how it was more than just a way to stay warm,
Yeah.
But how does this research, like this stuff from Fuente del Salín, how does that change how we see the Gravettians?
Well, you have to think about when they were living right. The Gravettian period was during some of the coldest times in Europe.
Oh, during the Ice Age.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
archaeologists always thought that a lot of their innovations, the tools, the art,
Right.
those were a response to how harsh the environment was. Like they had to adapt just to survive.
Mm-hmm. So it was all about just like being on the edge, fighting for survival.
Yeah, that was the main idea for a long time.
Right.
And it's definitely part of it, but Fuente del Salín suggests there's more to it than that.
Okay.
Because remember, they found all this complex use of fire in a place that wasn't that cold.
So they weren't just like freaking out about freezing to death.
Right, exactly.
It seems like it was something they did no matter what the weather was.
Yeah, it suggests it was just something they did, a cultural thing, something they carried with them.
So instead of just reacting to the cold, they were using fire to make the environment what they wanted.
Yes, it changes how we see them, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
It's not just survival anymore. We see them making choices, deciding how they want to live, interact, not just with the world, but with each other.
It's more nuanced, more interesting, too.
Oh, I agree.
They feel more human, more like us.
Absolutely. And it raises interesting questions about fire and humans in general.
Oh, like what? Like, when did fire become more than just a tool? When did it get cultural? Was it gradual, or was there a moment when fire became social, symbolic?
I mean, think about how we use fire today. We still gather around it, fireplaces, bonfires. It's not just about heat anymore.
You're right. It's about connection.
Right. Community.
It's in our celebrations, rituals, even just lighting a candle.
Wow, yeah. It's like echoes of the Gravettians are all around us.
It's a powerful thought, isn't it?
It is.
That something so simple, so primal, can connect us across thousands of years. Fire shapes how we interact, how we experience things.
And we talked about the Neanderthals too, right? If the Gravettians learned about fire from them, what does it tell us?
That's a big question, a lot of debate.
Yeah.
We know Neanderthals and early humans lived together for a long time.
Right.
And we're finding more and more evidence that they shared things, cultures mixed.
So this knowledge about fire, that could have been passed down.
It fits, yeah. It's a part of a bigger picture. Different groups interacted, maybe even interbred. So it's not like what we always thought, like these groups were totally separate.
Right.
It was more messy, mixed up, way more interesting, really.
I think so.
And these studies, like the one from Fuente del Salín, help us see those connections. It's all part of human evolution.
Absolutely.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm thinking about fire, the Gravettians, even human evolution in a new way.
That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
And I think the big takeaway is don't make assumptions about the past. Something that seems simple, just a way to survive, it can tell us so much more about culture, social stuff, even about our connection to other humans, other lineages.
Yeah, there's always more to the story, new ways to see the past. We talked about the fire at Fuente del Salín, maybe even Neanderthals, and what it all means about Gravettian culture, human evolution. But before we wrap up, is there anything else from this study that stood out? Anything that you found interesting?
There is one thing, actually. It has to do with how the hearths were placed inside the cave.
Oh, okay, tell me more.
They weren't just scattered around randomly, you know? They were grouped in certain areas, a lot of them near the walls.
What do you think that means, how they used this space?
Well, maybe they were using the walls to reflect the heat and light from the fire, making it stronger.
Oh, that's clever, like making these cozy little spots.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows they were thinking ahead, planning how they lived. They weren't just living in a cave, they were designing it.
So even in the Ice Age, they wanted to be comfortable.
It shows their ingenuity, right?
Yeah.
Adapting, thriving in a tough environment.
It really does. It makes me think even back then, they were finding ways to be comfortable, to build a community, find meaning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even in the Ice Age, people were still people.
It's funny. We always think innovation comes out of necessity, right?
Right.
But this research really makes you rethink that.
It does. We always imagine our ancestors, especially during the Ice Age, just struggling.
Just trying to survive.
Yeah, and all their innovations, it's like we assume they only happened because they had to adapt.
Yeah.
But the Gravettians, they show us there's more to it.
Yeah, it's not just about making it through, is it?
Oh.
Even in tough times, there's still room for creativity, culture, choices that go beyond just basic needs.
They were shaping their world, not just reacting to it.
Right, exactly. They had agency, purpose. I think we forget that sometimes.
I agree.
It makes you wonder about fire and how we evolved. I mean, did it affect our brains, our behavior, how we became social?
That's a really good question, a big one. Scientists have been thinking about that for a long time.
And they think.
Well, there's this theory that using fire, controlling it, maybe that's a big part of why we have these big brains.
Oh, interesting.
And why we have complex social structures.
Makes sense. I mean, cooking makes food easier to digest, more calories. Maybe that helped our brains grow.
Exactly. And just imagine them all gathered around the fire, talking, telling stories, teaching each other.
So fire, it wasn't just practical. It was like this cultural engine, right? It helped create language, art, maybe even rituals. The stuff that makes us human.
It's a really cool idea, and researchers are still working on it, figuring it out.
Well, we've talked about a lot, haven't we? The Fuente del Salín evidence, maybe Neanderthals were involved, and what it all means for the Gravettians, how they saw fire. But as we finish up, I want to leave everyone with a thought.
Okay.
We said fire was for warmth, a tool, social. But what if it was something more, like almost spiritual?
I like that.
The flames, the shadows, fire has this mystery to it, It's easy to imagine it had a deeper meaning for the Gravettians.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like a connection to something bigger. And we still feel that today, don't we?
We do.
Sitting around a campfire, lighting a candle, even just watching a fireplace. Fire makes us think. It makes us feel things.
It reminds us of how long we've been connected to fire.
It really does. It shaped everything, how we evolved, our culture, who we are.
It really has.
So, to everyone listening, next time you see fire, really look at it. Think about its history, what it means, and how it connects us to the past.
To the present.
Maybe even to something more.
It's been great talking about this.
It really has. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.
Keep those fires burning.